Picture the coldest night you've ever had. The kind where you wake at 3 in the morning and can't feel your feet and lie there debating whether it's worth the effort to find another blanket. That kind of cold. Now, take away the blanket. Take away the mattress underneath you, the pillow, the frame, the box spring, the central heating clicking on somewhere in the walls. Take away the walls that were built with insulation in mind. Take away the double-glazed windows. Take away the idea, the very concept, that a house is something designed to keep the outside outside. Now put yourself on a straw pallet on a stone floor in a hall in Yorkshire, England, 1542. Add a fire in the centre of the room. A real fire, not a gas fire in a fireplace with a little glass screen in front of it. A genuine open hearth, burning green wood that spits and hisses, sending 3/4 of its heat directly up through a hole in the thatched roof above your head. The smoke goes up too, mostly. It doesn't. Some of it stays down here with you. Add 12 other people sleeping in the same hall, the stable hand who smells of horses, the dairymaid who smells of something harder to name, the scullery boys, the youngest of whom is 7 years old and cries quietly in the dark sometimes, and everyone pretends not to hear him. Add the dog, a big shaggy thing that was brought in from the rain 2 nights ago and has not left since, and smells exactly the way you'd expect a wet dog that hasn't been properly dried to smell. Add the rushes on the floor. They were put down 3 months ago. They haven't been changed. Underneath the freshish rushes on top are the rushes from before, which are composting quietly. Things live in those rushes. You've learned not to look too closely. Things that bite, things that burrow, things that are just part of the background reality of being alive in Tudor England that nobody particularly talks about, because what would be the point? Add the smell. Wood smoke first and always, then tallow candles gone cold, then the fat from the previous night's supper dripped from the spit onto the hearthstones, now baked into permanence, then the rushes, then the people, then you, because you smell too, and you've begun to notice it less, which might be adaptation or might be defeat. That's where you are. Thornfield Manor, North Yorkshire. 34 years into the reign of King Henry VIII, though nobody in this particular house talks about that Henry much, not since the trouble with the monks began. The trouble with the monks. But we'll get to that. This is not London. This is not court. This is not the England of Holbein portraits and velvet doublets and enormous padded shoulders making enormous political decisions. This is the England most people lived in, cold and dark and honest about being difficult, where winter is not a season you merely endure, it is a season with intentions, where the nearest person who calls himself a physician is 8 miles away and doesn't know much more than you do, and charges more than you earn in a month for the privilege of knowing it, where the world is mostly the same 3 miles in every direction, the village where you were born, the market town where you buy and sell, the manor where you work, the church where everything that matters, birth and marriage and death, gets recorded in Latin by a priest who may or may not understand what he's writing. We are going back there tonight. Not as visitors, not as tourists in costume. We are living it. One body, one life, everything you would have touched and smelled and carried and feared. I make these history stories, and honestly I have no idea if any of you actually sleep to them, or if you're all just peculiar people who want the last thing they hear before unconsciousness to be someone explaining in detail what Tudor England smelled like, and why the walls were damp, and whether you would have survived the winter. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Get comfortable. That part at least you can do better than the person in this story. Here we go. Your eyes open. For half a second, that beautiful, merciful half second, you don't know where you are. You're just awake, in the dark, and it's cold, and your body hasn't processed the rest of it yet. Then it hits you. The smell hits you first. Always the smell, and it comes in waves. Wood smoke from the dying fire sharp at the back of your throat. Underneath that, the sweet rot of the rushes beneath your palate. Underneath that, the wet wool smell of damp stone that never fully dries. Not in October, not in a house like this where the walls are 2 feet thick and the moisture seeps in from the ground up through every winter. Underneath all of it, underneath everything, the smell of 12 other sleeping people and you among them, and animals just outside the door, and the privy which is a wooden shed 7 steps from the kitchen entrance, and the knowledge that this is all entirely normal and no one here finds it remarkable. This is how it smells to be alive in 1542. You lie there for a moment longer. The straw pallet beneath you has developed a hollow in the shape of your body over these 6 weeks. That's something, at least. It doesn't poke you in quite the same places it did when you first arrived. You're Thomas Ashford. Tom, everyone calls you. 14 years old, come from the village of Stainton, which is about 15 miles east of here, across the moor. You came with a letter from the vicar of Stainton, who knows a man who knows Sir Edward Bassett's steward, and the letter said you were a good boy, which was technically true, and hard-working, which was true enough, and quick to learn, which you're desperately hoping will prove to be true before they notice that you don't yet know what you're doing. You arrived with a bundle of clothes, 2 shirts, 1 pair of woolen hose, 1 pair of leather shoes that you have since ruined crossing, the more in rain, and a small wooden cross your mother pressed into your hands the morning you left. You're a kitchen boy, the lowest rank in the household kitchen, below even the spit turner, because the spit turner at least has a specific skill. You have to be taught to turn the spit at the correct speed. There is a correct speed, and you are below that. Your job, at its most fundamental, is to do whatever Agnes tells you. Agnes is the cook. Agnes is 50 years old and built like someone made a person out of raw determination and then added a person on top of it for good measure. Agnes knows things about fire and meat and salt and timing that would take you a decade to properly learn, and she has communicated this to you clearly every single morning since you arrived. Usually within the first 3 minutes of your being awake, you need to be up. That is the first crisis of every morning. Not the cold, though the cold is real and physical, a weight pressing down on you that makes your body resist movement. Not the dark, though the dark is total. No lamps, no moonlight through the shuttered windows, nothing but the faint orange glow of coals banking in the central hearth. The crisis is time. Agnes begins cooking at 5 in the morning in summer, 4 in winter. The fires need to be lit before Agnes begins cooking. The fires need to have been lit by you. You lie there doing a rapid, panicked calculation. How long were you asleep? When did the fire in the hearth bank down to what it is now? Is the kitchen fire also out? The kitchen fire. You can feel your heart starting before your body properly wakes up. If the kitchen fire is out, you will hear about it for the rest of your life. You move. The cold hits you like stepping into a river. Your feet find the rushes, which are cold and slightly damp with the morning dew that has crept through the gaps in the walls. You're still in your clothes. Everyone sleeps in their clothes in this season. You learn that in the first week. But the shirt is thin, and the hall is frigid with the deep particular cold of a pre-dawn October morning in Yorkshire. Someone grunts as you step over them. Ned, the stable hand. Ned sleeps like a corpse and wakes like a thunderclap and is useful in neither state before he's had something warm in him. You move through the hall by memory and half feel, navigating between the sleeping shapes on the floor, past the trestle tables stacked against the wall, past the long shape of the dog who has somehow migrated to the warmest spot near what's left of the hearth. The door to the kitchen passage. You push through, and the cold changes quality immediately. This is kitchen cold. Earthen floor instead of rushes. Stone walls that hold the temperature of midnight. The smell shifting to old grease and cold ash, and something underneath that might be onion. The kitchen hearth. You can see it in the dark because there are coals at the bottom, still orange, still alive. You feel something in your chest unclench like a fist opening. You crouch down and you begin. This is the thing nobody tells you about fire, not really. Not before you do it 50 times and it becomes part of your hands rather than your head. You can't just put more wood on. The fire is a living thing in this state, coals banking down to that dangerous place between alive and dead, and if you crowd it now, if you pile wood on too fast, you'll smother it, and then you are genuinely in trouble. You blow, gentle, steady breaths. Your face gets hot, then your eyes water from the smoke. The coals glow brighter. You add the smallest things first, the dry tinder in the basket beside the hearth, the shredded bark that Agnes keeps for exactly this purpose in a clay pot with a lid. Because damp tinder is the enemy of morning, and Agnes treats it like a weapon against her. The tinder catches. You add the first small stick, no bigger than your finger. Then another. Your knees are on the cold floor, and you can feel the stone through the thin wool of your hose, a creeping ache spreading up your thighs. Your hands are already dirty with ash. The smoke catches you broadside, and for 10 seconds you can't breathe, and your eyes run, and you sit back coughing into your sleeve, watching the small new fire with the intense focus of someone who has a lot riding on it. It holds. You build it up carefully, methodically. This is what 6 weeks has taught you, if nothing else. Patience with fire, because fire doesn't care about your urgency. Fire moves at fire's pace, and there is nothing useful you can do about that except be patient and keep feeding it and not panic. By the time Agnes comes through the door, hands already dusted with flour from habit, the kitchen fire is going properly. The iron pot hook is swung over it, empty for now. The hearthstones are warming. She looks at the fire. She looks at you. She says nothing. That is, you have learned. Good. Agnes Cook, that is actually her surname, which might be fate or coincidence, but either way seems perfectly suited. Has been cook at Thornfield Manor for 22 years. She came when Lady Bassett came, the two of them arriving together from a house in Lincolnshire, and she has outlasted 1 steward, 3 ladies' maids, an outbreak of sweating sickness in the summer of 1528 that killed 2 of the underservants and nearly killed her, and at least 4 kitchen boys before you. What happened to the kitchen boys is not something she has discussed directly. She is not a cruel woman. You've worked out that much. She is demanding, which is different. She is exacting, which is different still. She has a standard in her head for how things ought to be done, built up over a lifetime of doing them, and when reality diverges from that standard, she finds it genuinely upsetting in a way that expresses itself as sharpness. Water, she says now, not looking up from the board where she's beginning to work a lump of dough. The pot needs filling before it goes on. Don't stand there. You don't stand there. The well is in the yard. The yard is outside. Outside is the cold morning, still dark enough that you can see your breath in thick clouds, the sky just beginning to differentiate between black and very dark grey above the manor roof line to the east. You take the bucket from its peg beside the kitchen door. The handle is iron, which means it's been storing cold all night, and when you grip it, the chill goes straight through your palm like a warning. You carry it across the yard, the cobbles wet and slightly treacherous underfoot to the well. The well has a windlass handle. You lower the bucket, hear it hit the water below, wait for it to fill. It takes longer than you'd think, because at this time of year the water level is lower. The bucket needs to be at the full depth of the rope. Then you haul it back up, arm over arm, the rope rough against your hands. You didn't have calluses when you arrived. Farmers' sons get calluses from harvest work, from hoeing, from the particular friction of a scythe handle. But your father was a craftsman, a thatcher, and you worked with him. And thatching's calluses are different things from kitchen calluses. The first 2 weeks your hands were raw by midday. They bled in the cracks between your fingers where the skin split from cold water and repeated wetting and the particular roughness of the well rope. They've hardened now. That's something. The cracked skin has toughened into something more useful. You carry the bucket back across the yard. It's heavy. Water is always heavier than you expect, and you spill a little on the cobbles, which freeze overnight sometimes, and this morning is threatening to, and you get it through the kitchen door and hung on the pot hook over the fire without losing more than a cupful. Agnes watches this and says nothing. There's probably a compliment in there somewhere. The household of Thornfield Manor runs on a schedule so rigid you could set a church clock by it, and in some ways, for some people here, the church clock is exactly what they do set it by. At 5 a.m, kitchen fires going, water heating, Agnes beginning the bread, you fetching and carrying. At 6, the household wakes, not all at once. Rank determines when you rise, and the lowest ranks rise earliest, which feels backwards until you understand that the lowest ranks are the ones making the morning possible for everyone above them. By 7, the upper servants have risen. The steward, Mr. Hartley. The lady's maid, a woman named Joan, who has a face like a hawk and opinions about everything. The gentleman's body servant, a man called Robert, who has been with Sir Edward so long he's developed some of Sir Edward's mannerisms without apparently noticing. At 8, Sir Edward comes down. This is the pivot around which the entire household turns. When Sir Edward comes down, breakfast happens. When Sir Edward doesn't come down, illness, foul mood, one of his occasional mornings where he stays abed with his books, the household shifts into a kind of suspended animation, everyone waiting for the day to properly start. At 8:30, Lady Bassett, always precisely half an hour after her husband, as though she times it. She probably does time it. Lady Margaret Bassett is 43 years old and manages this house, the farm, the tenants, the accounts, the stores, the relationships with neighbouring gentry, and her husband's public dignity with a quiet efficiency that you are only beginning to appreciate. She appears to do nothing. She actually does everything. And then there's the children, 3 of them. William, who is 12 and being educated by a tutor who comes from the market town on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Catherine, who is 9 and has decided she's going to be a lady-in-waiting to the Queen someday, which she discusses with great seriousness. Little James, 5 years old, who ran through the kitchen 3 days ago and knocked over a pot of pottage, and scalded his arm and cried for an hour, and Agnes didn't shout at him once, which told you something about Agnes. Your place in all of this is below stairs, below consideration, below almost everyone except Will, the 7-year-old scullery boy who cries at night and doesn't know yet that will pass. Breakfast in the great hall of Thornfield Manor. This is another thing nobody tells you before you come. You'd think eating together, a household sitting down to eat, all of them, it sounds almost cosy, would be the pleasant part of the day. A shared meal, warmth and food and community. And it is, if you are Sir Edward at the head of the high table, eating manchet bread, the fine white bread, with butter and perhaps some cold meat from last night and small ale. Because even Sir Edward drinks small ale in the morning rather than water, because water can't be trusted. The further you are from Sir Edward's end of the hall, the worse the food gets. Not catastrophically worse. Nobody in this household goes hungry, which you have understood from talking to people who grew up on less secure ground, is not something to take for granted. But the gradations are real, and they are noted. The high table, Sir Edward, Lady Bassett, the tutor on the days he comes, any guests, gets the manchet, the white bread, the choice cuts. The upper servants, Mr. Hartley, Joan, Robert, get good bread, perhaps a step coarser at the middle table. The lower servants, the stable hands, the dairymaids, the laundry women get maslin bread at the far end. Maslin is a mix of wheat and rye, darker, denser, filling in the way that good bread is filling. It's perfectly fine bread. You're not complaining about the bread. But the manchet is extraordinary. You've touched it once, carried it from the kitchen on a cloth, and the softness of it under your fingers was something you thought about for the rest of the day. That's how far removed the worlds are across 40 feet of hall. The pottage is the great equalizer. Everyone gets pottage. Agnes makes it in the great cauldron that hangs over the kitchen fire from before dawn, a thick porridge of dried peas and oats and whatever vegetables are available. Turnip now, leek, the last of the summer's dried herbs, and it's hot and filling and smells of everything good that fire and water and time can do to simple ingredients. Sir Edward's pottage might have a bit more meat in it. Your pottage is the base. It doesn't matter. It's warm and it's in your body. And by 8 in the morning you've already been working for 3 hours. Today is a Tuesday. Tuesday is when things happen at Thornfield. You don't know this yet when you're washing the breakfast bowls in the kitchen, your hands in water that started warm and is now the temperature of indecision, not quite cold, not quite useful, your arms deep in the wooden tub while Agnes organises the morning's work with the efficiency of a military campaign. You find out when Mr. Hartley comes into the kitchen, which he rarely does, and speaks to Agnes in a low voice near the door, and Agnes nods. And when Hartley leaves, she looks at you. The Bassetts have guests coming, she says. Sir Robert Percy and his party. Tonight, they'll expect a proper supper. She says proper supper the way you might say impending storm. How many, you ask? Sir Robert, his wife, 2 servants, and a priest. She's already turning back to the board, already thinking through quantities and timing and the contents of the larder. So, 7 extra at table, including ourselves. A proper supper for the Bassetts means, and you've learned this from experience, most of it panicked, multiple courses. Not the usual 2 dishes, actual courses, which means more fire, more preparation, more carrying, more hours on your feet. Tom! Agnes, not looking up. After you finish the bowls, I need you to go to the butcher in Aldwick and collect what's been set aside. Aldwick, the market town, 3 miles. You know this walk. You've done it 4 times now. Down the lane from the manor, through the home field, across the brook where the stepping stones are slippery, but manageable if you're careful. Up the long hill into Aldwick. 3 miles in October, early morning going. 3 miles back, loaded. Yes, Agnes, you say. She pulls a small piece of leather from her apron pocket. The receipt. Agnes can't read, but Agnes has a system. The leather has marks scratched on it, notches and symbols she's developed over years. The butcher, a man called Godfrey, knows the system. You hand him the leather, he reads it, he gives you what's written there. You hand over the coins from the kitchen purse that Agnes keeps in the locked box under the preparation bench. You take the leather, you take the coins, counted carefully, Agnes watching, your hands, and you go. The lane outside Thornfield Manor in October morning is a different thing from the lane in summer. In summer you came to understand it as a pleasant thing, wide enough for a cart hedged on both sides with hawthorn gone silver, with old man's beard and bryony. The fields beyond smelling of cut hay, the sky enormous and full of larks. A walk that required nothing from you except to exist within it. In October, the lane has become a project in survival. The ruts from the last cart through are frozen at their edges and liquid at their centres, which means each step is a negotiation. The hedges are stripped bare, black branches against a grey sky. The fields are turned earth, dark and wet, smelling of mud and the particular richness of decomposition that means the soil is doing its winter work. The cold is a presence rather than an absence. It has weight. You feel it against your cheeks, your ears especially. You have no covering for them, and the wind off the moor is direct and determined. Your breath comes out in thick clouds. Your feet inside the leather shoes Agnes helped you patch with scraps of tallow-softened hide last week are cold at the soles, but not dangerously so. Not yet. The walk warms you eventually. That's the thing about cold morning walking. For the first 10 minutes it seems like you'll freeze solid where you stand, and then your blood figures out what's happening and decides to help, and by the time you're over the ridge you're almost warm. The brook crossing. The stepping stones are, as you feared, glazed at their edges. The brook is higher than it was last time, quick and brown with runoff from 2 days of rain. You test each stone with your foot before committing weight to it, and on the third stone your foot slides half off, and you throw your arms out and do a moment of very undignified recovery that involves some hopping, and one extremely bad second where you can feel yourself going, and then you don't go. You stand on the far bank, heart hammering, coins safe, receipt leather dry in your fist. The cold brook water has got into your left shoe through the gap in the sole that Agnes's patch is only approximately covering. Your left foot is wet. This is the kind of thing that matters in 1542. In a way it doesn't quite matter when you have dry socks and waterproof boots as backup options. A wet foot in October means the rest of your morning in a wet foot. It means the cold has a way in that it didn't have before. You keep walking. There's nothing else to do. Aldwick. You come into it from the south, down the long hill, and the town resolves itself out of the grey morning in stages. First, the church tower, stone, square, rising above the roof lines, the weather vane on its top catching the little light there is. Then the roof lines themselves, thatch and some tile, the better houses, clustered along the main street that runs north to south, which is also the market street, which is also the only proper street in Aldwick unless you count the lanes off it, which are more philosophical statements about streets than actual streets. Market day is Thursday. Today is Tuesday, so the street is quieter than you've seen it on your 2 Thursday visits, but not empty. Aldwych has perhaps 400 souls living in and around it. On a Tuesday morning, maybe 100 of them are on or near the main street, going about the business of being alive in the 1500s. You know some faces now, not names. You're too new for names, but faces that recur. The woman who sells eggs from a basket every day, rain or shine, positioned outside the church gate with the particular patience of someone who's been selling eggs outside this particular gate for so long, she's become part of the architecture. The ironmonger whose shop front is never quite closed or open but perpetually in between. The man himself, visible in the dim interior, hammering at something, the two. Old men who sit on a bench outside the Woolpack Inn regardless of weather, talking about things you can't hear from the road, though you suspect the subject never changes much, and Godfrey the butcher. Godfrey's shop is midway along the main street, identifiable from 50 yards by the smell. Not a bad smell exactly. Blood and salt and the particular mineral richness of raw meat, but an emphatic one. The smell of the physical fact of meat before it becomes food. The shop front is open, the wooden counter folded down to display what Godfrey is selling today. Cuts of salt pork from the autumn slaughter, 2 haunches of mutton hanging on hooks, a string of small birds, thrush maybe or sparrow, it's hard to tell when they're plucked, that someone has brought in. Godfrey himself is a big man. He has the kind of body that suggests he's been doing physical work since he was younger than you, shoulders that slope into arms that end in hands that could probably stop a horse. His face is ruddy and good-humoured, and he wears a stained linen apron over his clothes that contains evidence of several weeks' worth of work. You hand him the leather receipt. He looks at it. His eyes move across the notches and marks the way your eyes move across words, fluidly, reading it as naturally as you'd read a sentence. He nods. Aye, Agnes said last Thursday. I've got it. He disappears through the door at the back of the shop. While he's gone, you stand at the counter and watch the street. A woman goes by with a basket of laundry balanced on her head, which you've seen people do in Aldwych and still find astonishing. A child is chasing a chicken that has clearly escaped from someone's yard and doesn't want to go back. The chicken is winning. 2 men argue in the doorway of a building you think might be a tanner's from the smell. A deeper, more committed smell than Godfrey's. The smell of hides in various stages of becoming leather, which requires soaking in vats of things you prefer not to think about too carefully. The church bell rings once, twice, 7 times. 7 o'clock, which means you've been walking for just under 2 hours, counting the time from when Agnes sent you out. Godfrey comes back with a parcel wrapped in sacking, heavy. You can feel it when you take it. The weight of several pounds of meat, the cold of it already seeping through the sacking into your hands. He also has a smaller package, tied in oilcloth. He sets it on the counter and looks at you with an expression you haven't seen on him before. For Agnes, he says, separate from the order. Something she asked for private. You look at the oilcloth package. She didn't say anything about, she wouldn't. Just make sure she gets it herself, not Hartley, not Lady Bassett. He meets your eyes. Agnes herself. You pick it up. It's lighter than the meat. Oddly shaped under the oilcloth. Multiple things wrapped together. Right, you say, because what else do you say? You put both packages in your carry cloth, tie it as best you can, and sling it over your shoulder. And you start back toward Thornfield Manor, 1 foot wet, carrying something for Agnes that is apparently a secret in a year when secrets can get people killed. You think about this on the walk back. It is not possible to live in England in 1542 and not know that secrets can get people killed. This is not hyperbole. This is the current operating reality. Let me explain something, because this is important, and it's the kind of thing that makes the ground under your feet in this story feel different from the ground under your feet in other stories. King Henry VIII, your king, the king whose image is on the coins in your pocket, has been doing things for the last 10 years that have rewritten the entire spiritual and physical landscape of England, not metaphorically, literally. He separated England from the Catholic Church in 1534, which you know means something, even if the full weight of it is still filtering through society in complex ways that nobody fully understands yet. He declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. He dissolved the monasteries, started in 1536 with the smaller ones, moved to the larger ones, and by 1540 by now, it's essentially done. 500 years of monastic life in England, the monasteries that ran hospitals and schools and almshouses and kept the records and fed the poor, gone, dissolved, their lands sold off to local gentry and wealthy families, their monks and nuns turned out. Sir Edward Bassett bought a farm that used to belong to the Priory of St. Cuthbert in the Moor, which is 2 miles from Thornfield. The priory itself is still standing, or was, last you heard. The monks were sent away 18 months ago. What's left of the building is a skeleton of stone that the locals have been gradually taking apart for building material. This is what happened to the monasteries of England, and in the village of Aldwick, and in the farms and lanes around it, there are people who remember the monks, who went to the monks when they were sick, who learned to read in the monastic school, who had fathers and brothers and uncles who were monks and who are now simply where? Nobody quite knows. Some of them kept practicing the old faith in secret. Under the new faith, this is heresy. Heresy is a crime. The small package wrapped in oilcloth under your arm suddenly feels much heavier than its actual weight. You're half a mile from the manor, the home field opening up ahead of you, the manor roof line just visible over the ridge, when you hear it. Singing, not quite singing, chanting. It's coming from the spinney off to your right. A small cluster of oak trees left standing for firewood and timber, gone bare now, their branches black against the sky. From inside the spinney, partially hidden by the trunks, someone is chanting in a language that isn't English. You stop. The sound is familiar, in the way that something you've only heard a few times can be familiar if those few times were significant. You heard it in church before the church changed. The old Latin responses, the particular cadence of the Mass, the call and response that used to fill every church in England every Sunday, and now fills exactly none of them officially. The chanting stops. Silence. Wind in the bare branches. You start walking again, faster, your wet foot slipping slightly on the frozen mud at the field edge. You don't look back at the spinney. You don't look back. The kitchen when you return is a different world from the kitchen you left. In the time you've been gone, Agnes has assembled the operation she'll be running for the rest of the day, and it's now running. The fire is roaring. Not a modest, warming fire, a fire with purpose, a fire that means business, iron and heat together, producing the kind of aggressive warmth that makes the air above the hearth shimmer. The great spit has been set up, the iron rod running across the fire, supported on Y-shaped forks at either end. on the spit. Nothing yet, but you can see the large joint of pork that Agnes has been preparing since before you left, now sitting on the board rubbed with salt and herbs and something that smells of dried apple. Will, the small scullery boy, is at the trestle with a pile of onions and a knife almost too big for his hands, peeling with great seriousness. Mary, the other kitchen maid, is at the other end, doing something complicated with dried fruit and a bowl of honey. The smell in here is already something, warm and rich and layered, the building complexity of a kitchen that has been working since before dawn. Agnes looks up when you come in. You set the meat package on the board in front of her. Then you take the oilcloth package and hold it out. Godfrey said to give you this. He said privately, not Mr. Hartley. Agnes's face doesn't change, which in a way is its own expression. She takes the package, turns away, tucks it somewhere under her apron that you can't see. Good lad, she says. That's 2 pieces of good in one day, a record by some margin. She says nothing else about it, neither do you. The morning passes in labour that isn't heroic or dramatic, but is relentless. There is, in a Tudor household of this size preparing for guests, no moment that isn't needed somewhere. You carry water, you carry firewood. The woodpile is around the side of the manor, under a rough lean-to shelter, and you make 4 trips with armloads that leave bark and splinters and cold in your hands. You hold things when Agnes needs both hands for something else. You stir the great pot when Agnes's arms get tired, which doesn't happen often but does happen, and she hands you the paddle and says don't stop, as though you dream of stopping with Agnes standing there watching. The pottage. The bread. Agnes's bread has been baking since dawn, and the smell that comes off it when she pulls the loaves out and sets them on the board to cool is the closest thing to an argument for God's existence that you've encountered in your 14 years. Hot bread, fresh baked, the crust cracking as it cools, the steam rising. You're explicitly forbidden from touching the bread until it's properly cooled, because Agnes says warm bread gives you the gripes, which may or may not be true, but the prohibition is absolute. Then the preparation for supper. The joint of pork goes on the spit around midday. Will is appointed spit turner, which means he sits on a low stool at the corner of the hearth and turns the iron rod at a steady pace, hour after hour, his face slowly going red from the heat, the fat dripping and sizzling on the hearthstones below. The sauce, Agnes makes the sauce for the pork, which involves dried fruit and spices from a small locked box she keeps above the preparation bench. Spices that cost more per ounce than you'll earn in a week, cinnamon and cloves, and something that came originally from somewhere so far away that the name of the place sounds made up. The pastry, a meat pasty for the middle table servants, because guests mean everyone eats better, which is one of the genuinely pleasant consequences of Sir Edward's social ambitions. And the subtlety. The subtlety is a confection, a sugar sculpture, and Agnes doesn't make it herself. That's above Agnes's particular speciality. But a woman from the town has been commissioned for it, and it arrives at the kitchen door mid-afternoon carried by her son, wrapped in cloth, and Agnes unwraps it with a reverence that makes you understand, without quite being able to explain it, how much the occasion means. The subtlety is a stag, made of sugar, moulded and painted with food colours, antlers and all, perhaps 8 inches tall. It is more beautiful than anything currently in the kitchen, and more fragile, and Agnes immediately puts it somewhere safe and tells everyone in the kitchen not to touch it with a look that suggests she means people who aren't physically in the kitchen right now as well. Mid-afternoon, a moment. Agnes sends you to check the progress of the fire in the great hall. The guests will be there within the hour, and it needs to be properly going, not just limping along. And this takes you through the hall itself, which gives you a rare moment to see it in its prepared state. The trestle tables are up and dressed. Linen cloths, not everyday ones. Cleaner, whiter, folded earlier this morning by Joan the lady's maid with a precision that was almost painful to watch. The candles are not yet lit, but they're set. Beeswax for the high table. Beeswax smells clean and sweet, burns bright. And tallow for the middle and lower tables. Tallow smells of itself, burns adequately, drips more. The salt cellar, a silver one, not enormous, but real silver, one of the household's significant possessions, sits at the midpoint of the high table. Salt, it seems so ordinary. But your place at table is determined partly by where you sit in relation to the salt cellar. Above the salt, important. Below the salt, less so. You eat below the salt. The guests will eat above it. The hall is 40 feet long, the fireplace at one end, properly set now, burning well, the heat radiating out into the rushes and the cold air and slowly making something like warmth. The high windows letting in the flat grey October light at the other. The roof beams above are old, darkened by decades of smoke, hung with the dried herbs and flowers that Mrs. Hartley supervises the strewing of each summer. Lavender, mostly. Dried to grey now, but if you crush a sprig between your fingers, the oil is still there, faint and sweet. The stag's head above the fireplace, Sir Edward's grandfather's apparently. Its glass eyes catch the firelight. The antlers spread above the mantel, worn smooth at the tips where generations of household members have touched them. This room is the centre of this household. This is where life, formal, official life, happens. Birth announcements made here, marriages arranged here, tenants received here, justice dispensed here in Sir Edward's role as local magistrate. You stand in it for a moment, just a moment. Then you go back to the kitchen, because Agnes will have noticed your absence. The guests arrive at 4 o'clock. You don't see them arrive. You're in the kitchen, but you hear it. The sounds carry hoofbeats on the lane, the creak of a cart or carriage, voices raised in greeting, the particular rush of movement through the house as everyone adjusts to the presence of outside people. Sir Robert Percy and his party. You learn later in bits and pieces who they are. Sir Robert is a man of slightly higher rank than Sir Edward, which creates a particular dynamic that Mr. Hartley navigates with the care of a man walking on ice. They have known each other 20 years. They trade favours in the complex, unspoken economy of local gentry relationships. The visit is part business, something to do with a disputed boundary between their estates, and part the normal human business of visiting, of sitting together and eating and talking and maintaining the connections that keep you from being alone in the world. The priest in the party is the interesting one. His name, you learn from Mary in the kitchen when she comes back from carrying water to the guest rooms, is Father Dominic. He is Sir Robert's household chaplain. He says Mass for Sir Robert's family in the Reformed manner, which is what priests do now. The New English Service, the new prayer book. Mary tells you this, and then makes a face that you can't quite interpret. What? You ask. She shakes her head. Nothing. Carry that water up. You carry the water up. Supper in the great hall. Your job during supper is the ongoing work of moving between kitchen and hall, carrying dishes up when Agnes rings the small bell she keeps, for this purpose, waiting at the edge of the room, being invisible until needed. Being invisible is a skill. It takes practice. You're not naturally inclined toward it. You are, by temperament, a person who notices things and is noticed noticing them. But 6 weeks in a household has taught you that invisibility is what the upper ranks require from you when they're eating. They're not being cruel. It's simply that having a servant be present in the room requires acknowledging their presence, and acknowledging their presence requires fitting it into a social framework, and that is work, and people at table don't want to do that work. So you become furniture, alert furniture, but furniture. From this position, you learn things. Sir Robert Percy is a tall man with a long face, and the beginning of a belly he hasn't quite decided what to do about. He talks a lot, but not without intelligence. He's talking about sheep farming now, specifically the current price of wool in York, and he knows his numbers. Sir Edward listens with the posture of a man hearing news he expected. Lady Bassett and Lady Percy, a small woman with quick, sharp eyes, are talking about something else entirely at the other end, a conversation you can't hear but which involves occasional glances toward Father Dominic that you file away without knowing quite where to put it. Father Dominic. He's younger than you expected a priest to be. Perhaps 30. Thin in the way that some men are thin. Not hungry thin, but lean, like something that has been stripped back to its essentials. He has a careful face, the kind of face that watches things without appearing to watch them. He's doing what you're doing, watching. From a more comfortable vantage point, he's seated at the upper table above the salt, but watching nonetheless. His eyes move around the room with a particular quality, as though he's looking for something specific and not finding it, or looking for something specific and finding it and not letting on that he has. When Agnes's pork comes out, fragrant amber-coloured, the fat crisped to a shell that breaks under the knife, even Father Dominic's careful face softens slightly. The smell of that pork, after a day of roasting, is one of the finest arguments for civilization you've encountered. You watch him eat a little of it and look quietly grateful. After supper, the household doesn't immediately collapse into rest. That's not how it works. The upper servants have duties that continue, clearing the high table, serving wine for Sir Edward and his guest who have moved to the small parlour with a fire, a space where they'll talk seriously about the boundary dispute. Lady Bassett has retreated with Lady Percy to her solar, her private room upstairs, warm and candlelit. The lower servants have the work that comes after meals, clearing, washing, storing. The kitchen fire needs banking for the night, but not extinguished. The leftover food, and there is leftover food at a supper like this, is dealt with according to a hierarchy even your leftovers have. The upper servants get first choice of what's left at the tables, then you and Will and Mary, then anything that remains goes to the dogs or outside for whoever might need it. You are washing bowls again, arms in the tub again, the water genuinely cold now because you've been doing this for 10 minutes without stopping to add hot, when Mary comes and stands beside you. She takes a bowl and starts drying it without being asked. Father Dominic asked about the priory, she says. You keep washing. At supper? Before? When he was waiting in the hall. He asked Joan where it was. The old priory. St. Cuthbert's? She nods. Why? Mary doesn't say anything for a moment. She dries the bowl carefully, sets it on the shelf. Joan says he's been to 3 other houses in the riding, she says, asking questions. You consider this? The priory, dissolved. 2 miles away. Monks, sent away over a year ago. And now a priest travelling with a local lord asking where the priory is. What kind of questions, you ask? I don't know. Joan doesn't say. She takes another bowl from you, but she said it in a certain voice. You understand what she means. Joan's certain voices are encyclopedias of information that she never directly provides. Outside, the night has fully arrived. The kitchen window shows you nothing but the reflected light of the fire and your own face in the dark glass. You think about the singing in the spinney on the way back from Aldwych. You think about the oilcloth package that Godfrey gave you, that Agnes took and said nothing about. You wash bowls until the water is grey and cold and the job is done, and you say nothing more to Mary because this is 1542, and knowing things is sometimes less safe than not knowing them. There is a thing that happens in this household on evenings when guests are present that doesn't happen on ordinary evenings. It might seem like a small thing, it's actually enormous. There is music. Sir Edward plays the lute. Not brilliantly, he will be the first to say so, and actually does say so, and then plays anyway, which is the right approach, but with genuine enjoyment. The lute is kept in the parlour, in a case lined with green velvet, and on special evenings it comes out. You know this happens because Mary told you, and because you can hear it from the kitchen passage when the parlour door is open, which tonight it is. The sound of a lute carries differently from a voice. It's quieter, more intimate, the notes hanging in the air longer than you'd expect. Sir Edward plays something you don't know the name of, a melody that rises and falls with a kind of repetition that is almost drowsy, the same phrases coming back in slightly different ways. Will, standing beside you near the kitchen door, has stopped moving. His mouth is slightly open. He's 7 years old and he's listening to music, the way children listen to things that have gotten all the way inside them. Agnes is behind both of you, and she doesn't tell either of you to get back to work. For about 3 minutes, the kitchen holds still. Then someone closes the parlour door. Agnes says, "Right then, let's get this cleared." And it's done. The guests are given the best rooms. Sir Robert and Lady Percy have the solar. Lady Bassett has moved to a smaller room, which you don't see but which Joan describes with the precise language of mild offence. Father Dominic has the room normally used by the tutor, which is small and cold, and has a window that doesn't quite close, which Father Dominic apparently accepted without complaint. The household, lower ranks, settle into sleep as the evening resolves. Will is already gone, curled on his pallet near the kitchen hearth rather than the hall. Agnes lets him do this, which you've concluded means Agnes has a heart considerably larger than her external presentation suggests. Mary goes up to the room she shares with Joan's maid. Ned the stable hand disappeared after supper with the particular purposeful look of someone who has plans that don't involve being on manor property. You lie down on your pallet in the hall. The fire has been banked. The dog is in his corner. The hall is dark and cold and smells of supper. The fat of the pork still in the air, settling into the rushes, becoming the smell of this particular evening. You lie there, and the day moves through you. The brook crossing and the wet foot, which dried eventually mostly. Agnes's face when you handed her the oilcloth package. The stag on the spit turning slowly in Will's careful hands. The great hall dressed for company. Father Dominic's careful eyes moving around the room. The singing from the spinney. You close your eyes. Something is happening at the edges of this story. Not the foreground story, the kitchen, the cooking, the running of a household. That story is loud and physical and present, but at the edges, in the places where the spinney meets the lane, and a priest asks where the old monastery is, and a butcher wraps something in oilcloth and says, "Give it to Agnes," not Hartley. England in 1542 is a country that is doing something very difficult. It is trying to change what it believes in, officially, while many of its people carry on believing the old things privately, and the question of where private ends and criminal begins is answered differently depending on who is asking. You don't know what Agnes had wrapped in that oilcloth. You decide, lying there in the dark, that you are not going to ask. Sleep takes you before you finish deciding. Wednesday. The guests leave after breakfast. Sir Edward and Sir Robert shake hands in the yard with the solemnity of men who have resolved something between them, though you don't learn what. Lady Percy kisses Lady Bassett on both cheeks, which Lady Bassett receives with a warmth that seems genuine. Farther, Dominic shakes hands with no one, nods to the assembled household and rides out on a grey horse that looks exactly as careful as he does. You watch them go from the yard, a bucket in each hand. Agnes appears behind your left shoulder. "Get those to the kitchen," she says. "I need water for the stock." You get them to the kitchen. The day returns to its ordinary rhythm. Thursday is market day in Aldwick, and on Thursday mornings the road from Thornfield to Aldwick is a different thing from the quiet lane you walked on Tuesday. Agnes sends you again, which you suspect is becoming your regular duty, and this time the carry cloth has a list scratched on a wooden tablet instead of the oilcloth business, and it's a straightforward list. Spices from the spice merchant, some thread for Lady Bassett from the haberdasher, 2 items from the apothecary that Agnes writes down in a cramped hand you've been practicing reading. The road. Other people on it now, coming from every direction. Toward Aldwick. Women with baskets, men with laden pack horses. A pair of boys younger than you driving a small flock of geese that are making the geese's views on the situation loudly known. A cart piled with sacking that smells of grain. The horse pulling it, with the philosophical patience of a horse who has been doing this for years and expects to continue doing it. You fall into step with the general movement. The stream of people, the noise of it, the conversation, the animals, the creak of cart wheels, is something you've started to find comforting rather than overwhelming. It took 3 weeks. Now the company of strangers on a road feels like something that belongs to you. The road comes into Aldwick from the south and empties into the main street, and on Thursday the main street is a different place entirely from Tuesday. The market, the stalls set up from before dawn. By the time you arrive, everything is in full operation. The street is twice as loud and twice as full as any other day, the stalls spreading out from the central area into the side lanes, overflowing down toward the church. Cloth. Aldwick has cloth merchants, not the Grand London merchants, but local people selling local weave, wool and linen, the practical fabric of ordinary life. The bolts of cloth on the trestle stalls are dyed in the colours available from local plants and some imported dye. Madder red, weld yellow, woad blue, and the unbleached natural cream of the wool itself. A woman with strong opinions and a loud voice is telling a cloth merchant exactly what's wrong with the piece she's holding. The merchant is maintaining a professional expression. Food. Always food. The vegetables of October. Cabbages and turnips and the last of the stored onions. Salt fish in barrels, the smell preceding them by 20 feet. A woman selling pies from a covered basket. The pies small and brown and indeterminate but hot. The heat coming off them in a cloud. Apples from someone's orchard, wizened now with storage but still sound. Dried herbs tied in bundles, honey in earthenware pots, animals, chickens in cages. 2 pigs being led by an unhappy farmer in a direction the pigs have no interest in going. Geese, yes, The same geese from the road now corralled in a corner near the inn, and people. The people are the market. 400 people in Aldwych, and it seems like all of them are here, plus everyone from the farms and villages within walking distance. You recognise some of them. The egg woman, the old men from the bench. Today engaged in commerce of some kind, a transaction being conducted with great deliberation over a small sack of something. You see faces you've seen before and don't know names for, and you see strangers, people from further away, and you see the different textures of prosperity and its absence laid out side by side in the clothes people are wearing, the weight they're carrying, the way they hold themselves. Aldwych on a Thursday is England reduced to a comprehensible scale. All the things that keep people alive, food and cloth and tools and medicine and company, arranged along a muddy main street under a grey October sky. The spice merchant is near the church. Aldwych has a spice merchant because Aldwych is a market town with aspirations, and because the surrounding gentry create a demand. His name is John Ashby, and his stall is distinctive. Small, carefully laid out. The spices in earthenware pots and cloth bags arranged with a precision that suggests he knows exactly how much each one is worth and doesn't want anything mixed up. The smell of his stall is extraordinary. In a street already complex with smells, animals, bodies, food in various states, the mud of the road, the wet wool of coats drying in the cold air, his stall is a concentrated point of something different, sweet and sharp and warm. The spices carrying the suggestion of distant places, of trade routes that stretch from England to the edge of the known world and sometimes beyond. You hand him Agnes's tablet. He looks at it, nods, goes through his pots with professional speed, measuring into small cloth bags, tying them, setting them on the counter for you. Cinnamon, he says, putting down one bag. Cloves, another. Pepper, a third, heavier one. And Agnes says she needs more ginger. I've got the root or the dried. She'll want the root. She didn't say which. She always wants the root. It's better. He wraps a piece of ginger root in paper. It's knobby and pale, about the size of your fist, smelling of something you can't quite name. Warm and sharp together, like a kind of plant that took warmth with it when it grew. He tells you the cost. You count out the coins from the kitchen purse, the coins cold between your fingers. The transaction is complete in the way that all these small transactions complete. Simple, repeated, the bones of the economy, 1,000 small exchanges making the whole thing work. You move on through the market. At the haberdasher's, waiting while the woman in front of you finishes a lengthy discussion about ribbon, you notice a group of men at the edge of the market area. Not buying or selling, standing. 3 of them. 2 are clearly servants or retainers. The cut of their coat, the way they stand with a particular alert readiness of men employed to be alert and ready. The 3rd is the one you notice. He's well dressed, not extravagantly. No silk, no obvious wealth, but well. A wool coat of good quality, a hat with a brim. He has a face you can't quite read from this distance, middle-aged, with a kind of weathering that comes from travel rather than outdoor work. He's looking at the market with a kind of professional attention that isn't quite shopping. He has papers in his hand. You can see them from here. Folded documents, official looking. Something in you goes quiet. Not fear exactly. More the feeling of a sound you half recognise. Something you've heard before in a different context, trying to place itself. Then the haberdasher's customer finishes, and you step up, and you ask for Lady Bassett's thread, and by the time you've finished and look back, the 3 men are gone. You're cutting back through the market, the carry cloth heavier now, making for the road south, when you hear your name. Actually, not your name exactly. You are Tom from Thornfield, to the people who know you in Aldwych, and it's Tom from Thornfield that gets called from somewhere to your left. You stop. It's the egg woman. She's waving at you from her position by the church gate, her basket mostly empty this late in the morning. You go over. She is, you've established on previous visits, a woman named Marjorie who is perhaps 60 and has been selling eggs outside this gate since she was young enough to have carried the basket instead of resting it on the wall. She knows everything that happens in Aldwych and a great deal of what happens in the villages around it, and she dispenses information at no charge as a kind of public service. Men came through yesterday, she says, without preamble, from York, 3 of them, with a warrant. You say nothing. Going to St. Cuthbert's, she says. The old priory. What for? She looks at you with the patience of someone whose life has required them to explain obvious things to young people repeatedly. Final audit, she says. Making sure the prior gave everything over proper when they dissolved it. Making sure nothing's been held back, hidden, kept out of the king's hands. She picks up an egg from the basket, the last one, and holds it in her fingers as though weighing it. They'll be there today, most likely. Maybe tomorrow. What do they do if they find something held back? She looks at you again. What do you think? The answer hangs in the cold market air. You don't need her to say it. She puts the egg back in her basket, picks up the basket. Give Agnes my regards, she says, and she walks away. The walk back to Thornfield is longer than the walk out, the way walks home always are when you have things to think about. The men with the warrant at the priory today, the oilcloth package that Godfrey gave you for Agnes, that Agnes took without explanation, the singing in the spinney yesterday, Father Dominic asking Joan where the priory was. You walk along the lane, the carry cloth over your shoulder, the cold coming up from the ground through your repaired shoe, and you think about what you know and what you don't know and what it might mean. Here is what you know for certain. You are a 14-year-old kitchen boy from Stainton. What happens at the Priory of St. Cuthbert in the Moor, or to whatever remains of its community, has nothing to do with you. Here is what you suspect, in the way that you suspect things when you pay attention and then don't quite look directly at what you've noticed. Agnes has been giving food to someone who needs it discreetly. Godfrey has been helping. The spinney at the edge of the home field is visited sometimes by someone who prays in Latin. Here is what you don't know. What the right thing to do is. Here is what you do. You walk back to Thornfield. You give Agnes the spices and the thread and the apothecary's packages. You tell her that Marjorie sends her regards. You say nothing about the men from York, because there is nothing useful in saying it, and everything potentially dangerous, and you're not brave enough for dangerous, and not reckless enough for useless. Agnes takes the packages. She looks at you for a moment, that measuring look she has, the one that seems to take your temperature. Good lad, she says for the 3rd time, and you go back to work. Friday morning, and the air has changed. You know this the moment you step out of the kitchen into the yard. Something in the quality of the cold, thicker, more deliberate. The sky to the north has a greenish grey that you've seen once before, 2 years ago in November, the morning before the first heavy snow. Agnes, when you mention it, says, I know, get more wood in, more than usual. You get more wood in. By midday the sky has gone fully to steel, The light has that flat, even quality that means clouds so thick they're swallowing all the directional information out of the sun. The temperature drops about an hour after that. Not gradually, definitely, like a door closing. Snow starts in the afternoon, not heavy at first, small dry flakes, almost polite about it, dusting the cobbles in the yard and the thatch of the stable roof. Will sees it through the kitchen door and says, "Oh," in a voice of pure wonder, because Will is 7 and snow is still magic. You look at it and think, road to Aldwych. You think, the men from York at the Priory. You think, the Spinney in this. Snow changes everything in 1542 in a way it doesn't quite change everything now. Roads become harder. Travel slows. Certain things that were possible yesterday, a walk to the market, a quick errand across the moor, become different calculations. Agnes has you spend the afternoon checking stores, the grain in the storeroom, the salt meat in the barrel, the dried peas and beans in their sacks, the root vegetables in the cellar beneath the kitchen. She doesn't tell you why she's auditing this. Agnes never explains her reasons, you've learned. She simply directs. But you understand, watching her face as she counts and notes, that she's calculating how long Thornfield Manor can sustain itself if the snow closes the road. "We're fine," she says finally. Not to you exactly, to herself. 3 weeks, easy, maybe 4 if we're careful. 3 or 4 weeks. The snow outside the window is already thickening. That evening, late, when the household is settled and the fires are banked and the hall is quiet with sleep, you're not asleep. You lie on your pallet and listen. The snow has stopped, but left its silence behind. Snow quiet, which is a particular kind of quiet, a kind where the world has put a layer of softness between you and its own noises. The hall feels sealed. The fire is low orange. The dog is a lump near the hearth. You hear the kitchen door, not loudly, a careful sound. The latch lifting and setting back with the particular care of someone trying to make no sound at all. Then the yard. You lie absolutely still. Your eyes are open. Something passes the hall window, which is shuttered but has the gap at one edge that lets the night air in. A shape, moving with that same careful quality. Toward the lane. Agnes. You're quite sure it's Agnes. You lie there. You make a decision. You don't get up. Not because you're afraid, or not only. Because you understand, in the way that 6 weeks in this household has taught you to understand things, that there is a transaction here that is not yours to be part of. Agnes is careful. Agnes knows what she's doing. Agnes has been doing this, whatever this is, for longer than you've been alive. You are a kitchen boy. Your job is not to know everything. Your job is to know when something is not your business. You lie there in the dark and listen to the snow quiet, and eventually, maybe 20 minutes later, the kitchen door opens and closes again with that same careful absence of sound. You close your eyes. Saturday morning. The snow is 3 inches deep on the ground and still threatening from above. The yard cobbles are covered. The lane is white. The fields beyond the manor are an unbroken plain of it. The hedge lines visible only as slight variations in the flatness. Will runs out into the yard before Agnes can stop him and throws himself down in the snow and makes an angel, which Agnes watches from the kitchen doorway with an expression that has no business being as soft as it is. Then she tells him to get up and get inside because there's water to fetch. He fetches it with snow, still in his hair, grinning. The manor in snow is a different thing. The sound changes, muffled, interior. The outside world gone quiet so that the inside world is louder by comparison. The fire in the kitchen crackles and pops. The walls seem closer. The smell of cooking is more concentrated. The warmth of the kitchen more conscious of itself. You clean the kitchen. You carry, you fetch, you stir. The ordinary work. Mid-morning, Agnes calls you over. She's at the preparation bench, hands already flurry from the morning's bread, and she looks at you with that measuring look for longer than usual. "You're not stupid," she says. It is not quite a compliment. It is more like a fact she has established and is now using as a premise. "I hope not," you say. "What you saw and what you heard this week." She doesn't elaborate. She's watching your face. You look back at her. "I work in the kitchen," you say. "I don't see much." Something in her face changes. Not a smile. Agnes doesn't smile often, not with her mouth, but something around her eyes. "No," she says, "you don't." She turns back to the bread. "Get more flour from the storeroom," she says. "The lower barrel's getting low." You get the flour. Sunday. The snow has stopped, but the cold has settled in to stay for a while. The sky is clear, hard blue, the kind that means no clouds and therefore no insulation, and therefore temperatures that drop at night to something genuinely dangerous for anyone without fire or shelter. The household goes to church in Aldwick. This is mandatory. Mr. Hartley's very clear about church. Sir Edward values church attendance from his people because he values his reputation as a godly Protestant householder, which is the thing to be in 1542 if you want to stay on the right side of things. The Reformation has settled into law. You go to the Reformed church. You hear the Reformed service in English now, the English you actually understand. The walk to Aldwick through the snow takes longer than usual. The road is passable but slow, your footprints the first marks in the white surface, and behind you the rest of the household files in a line, the senior servants nearest, you and Will at the back. It's beautiful, actually. You didn't expect that. The lane with its bare hedges coated in snow, the fields white and still, the sky that hard, perfect blue. The air so clean and cold that breathing it feels like drinking something. You can see your breath. You can see everyone's breath. The whole line of you, breathing clouds into the cold morning. The church in Aldwick is St. Mary's, stone, 300 years old, the tower you navigate by on every trip to town. Inside it's cold. Churches are always cold in winter, the stone holding the night long after day has started, and the congregation huddles in their Sunday clothes and breathes visible breath during the service. The vicar is a man named Thomas Cromwell. Not that Thomas Cromwell, the King's. Minister is Thomas Cromwell, the man who engineered much of the dissolution of the monasteries, who has been at the King's right hand for years. This Thomas Cromwell is a smaller and more local version, perhaps 40, who reads the Reformed service with a conviction that you can't quite tell is genuine or professional. He preaches. The sermon is in English, which is one of the actual things you can say has changed. You understand the sermon, it's addressed to you in a language you speak. The subject this Sunday is obedience, to God, to the King, to the law. The three together, interchangeable in important ways. You sit on the cold wooden bench and listen and think about Agnes and the kitchen door. After the service in the churchyard, while people talk and breathe clouds at each other, you walk to the far corner. There are new graves here. 3 of them you count since you first came to Aldwick. The earth is frozen now, the mounds covered in snow. One of them has a small wooden marker, roughly cut, the name just visible, Brother Francis. A monk's name, a monk's grave, in the corner of the churchyard where the grass is a little rougher, a little less maintained. Not everyone from the priory went far then. You stand there for a moment. The cold comes up from the ground through your shoes. Your breath makes clouds. Then Mr. Hartley calls the household together, and you file back down the road to Thornfield. That afternoon, this Sunday quiet of the manor, snow on the ground and the fire in the hall going, and nothing in particular you are required to do for 2 hours while Agnes rests and Will sleeps in his corner and the upper household occupies itself with Sunday things. You decide to go for a walk, not to Aldwick, just the grounds, the lane, the home field. You put on your coat, the coat that arrived with you from Stainton, slightly too big, which you've started to appreciate because it has more room for the cold air to warm against your skin, and you go out the kitchen door into the yard. The yard is a bowl of white. Your footprints from this morning's church walk are the only marks, already fading under the continued slight fall of snow that started an hour ago. You cross the yard, through the gate in the wall, out onto the lane. The lane in snow is a tunnel, the hedges white, the ruts filled in and smoothed. Everything reduced to black and white, the complexity of autumn removed. The spinney. You can see it from the lane, off to the right, maybe 50 yards. The oak trees bare and black, the snow on their branches, the space between them dark. You don't decide to go. You just find yourself going. The snow in the field is deeper than the lane, crunching under your feet with a sound that carries in the cold air. You step through the gap in the hedge and across the field toward the trees. Your footprints a clean line behind you in the snow. The spinney is darker inside than outside. The branches overhead, even bare, break the light. The snow on the ground is uneven. Not fresh fallen, but packed in the hollows between roots. Frozen. Someone has been here. You can tell. The snow is disturbed in a way that weather alone doesn't make. The specific disturbance of a person sitting, kneeling, moving about. Near the largest oak tree, a small shelter, or not a shelter exactly. A space where branches and a piece of rough cloth have been arranged to create something between a shelter and an absence. The kind of thing you'd only notice if you were looking for it. The kind of thing that from 20 feet away reads as a natural arrangement of wood and shadow. Underneath it, a rolled piece of cloth, a small clay pot sealed with wax, a piece of wood shaped. You crouch. The piece of wood shaped. It's a cross, rough but deliberate. Someone cut this from a branch and worked it into shape and smooth it, and at some point, maybe a long time ago, burned a small mark into the centre. The kind of cross you'd find in a monastery, the kind of cross that is now officially not the kind of cross you're supposed to keep in England, the kind of cross your mother pressed into your hands when you left Stainton. You sit back on your heels. Around you the spinney is still, snow still, the kind of silence that has weight in it. A bird somewhere above you, invisible, makes a small sound and stops. You think about what you know. There is a monk from St. Cuthbert's Priory living in or near this spinney. He has been here since the priory was dissolved, or came back here after going away and finding nowhere else to go. He is surviving somehow. The food from Godfrey, from Agnes, from people who know and are keeping the knowledge quiet. He comes here to pray in the old way, the Latin way, which is not the law's way anymore. He is here. He is cold. He has been cold for months. And men came from York this week with a warrant. You stand up. You leave the cross where it is. You leave the clay pot. You leave the rolled cloth. You walk back across the field, back through the gap in the hedge, back down the lane to the manor. At the kitchen door, stomping snow off your shoes, you meet Agnes coming the other way, carrying something wrapped in cloth. She stops when she sees you. You look at her. "Go inside," she says. "Yes, Agnes," you say. You go inside. That night, after supper, you find yourself in the hall, with nothing to do for the first time in what feels like weeks. The Sunday quiet. The fire going low and warm, not the working fire of a cooking day. Will is asleep. The dog is asleep. Two of the other servants are at the far end playing some game with wooden counters on the floor. You sit near the fire and think. You are 14 years old, in England, in 1542. You have been alive in the world for long enough to understand that it contains more things than you were taught at home, but not quite long enough to know what to do with most of them. You think about Brother Francis's grave in the churchyard corner, the rough wooden marker, the monk who ended his days in Aldwick with a corner of the graveyard and no one who knew quite what to write for him. You think about the monks in general. 500 years the monasteries had been here. Your great-great-whatever grandfather probably knew monks personally, the way you know Agnes. People who were just there, part of the landscape, part of how things worked. They ran schools, they ran hospitals, they kept the records, they fed people when harvests failed. And then, in the space of about 6 years, they were gone. And England has been trying to fill the space they left, and some of it is being filled and some of it isn't. And in the meantime there are men who used to be monks sleeping in spinneys in the snow. You don't know if what Agnes is doing is right or wrong in the eyes of the law. You know it's illegal. You know the law in 1542 is the king's law, which is specific and real and enforced with warrants and men, from York. You also know that Agnes has been feeding someone who is cold and hungry and praying in Latin in a wood, and you can't find it in yourself to think that's wrong, regardless of the law. The fire settles. A log shifts, sends up a small shower of sparks. Outside the hall windows the snow is falling again, soft and continuous. Tomorrow is Monday. Agnes will have you up at 5. The fire will need lighting. The water will need fetching. The bread will need making. The world goes on. You close your eyes and let it. Monday brings a surprise. Not a bad one, or not entirely. Agnes appears in the hall at an unusual hour, mid-morning when normally she wouldn't leave the kitchen, and tells you to clean yourself up as well as you can manage and come to the small parlour. Why? You ask, which is usually a mistake. Because Mr. Hartley wants to see you. She looks at your face. You're not in trouble. Get cleaned up. You wash your hands and face in the kitchen basin. You run. Your fingers through your hair. You are, let's be honest with ourselves, not a great deal cleaner than you were, but you are symbolically cleaner, which sometimes has to be enough. Mr. Hartley's parlour is a room you've been in exactly once before, to deliver something. It's small and tidy, the steward's domain, with a writing desk that holds the household's accounts and correspondence, and the various documents that make a house function. There's a fire in the small fireplace. There are 2 chairs. Mr. Hartley is in one of them. He's perhaps 55, a neat, careful man who keeps his clothes and his person with a precision that mirrors his record-keeping. He has been the steward at Thornfield for 12 years, and appears to view this as a permanent situation that will end only when one of them dies. He looks at you over his desk. "Tom," he says, "sit down." You sit in the other chair, which feels strange. "Agnes speaks well of you," he says. You wait. "You've been here 6 weeks. You seem to be learning," he pauses. Agnes says you're reliable and quiet. Reliable and quiet. You consider whether these are compliments. Yes, sir, you say. There may be more to your position here than kitchen work, Hartley says. Sir Edward will need a second stable hand next spring when Ned's brother comes to join him. Lady Bassett has mentioned needing someone to run the household correspondence to Aldwych on the regular. Minor things. Errands requiring a degree of discretion. He looks at you with the particular look of a man who is saying something and also saying something else at the same time. Do you understand me? He asks. I think so, sir, you say. A position of greater trust requires a person who understands that what they see in the course of their work remains their own knowledge, not discussed, not shared. He folds his hands on the desk, even with visitors. Father Dominic asking Joan where the priory was. The men from York. I understand that, sir, you say. He nods. The audience is apparently over. You stand. Agnes needs you back in the kitchen, Hartley says, already looking at his accounts. She's making the stock. You go back to the kitchen and help Agnes make the stock. October becomes November. November is what October was threatening to be. The snow comes and goes, but the cold stays committed. The lane to Aldwych gets harder, not impassable, but slower. The surface a negotiation of ice and mud and frozen ruts that require your full attention if you're going to stay upright. You learn things, how to bank a fire properly for overnight, not just piling on enough fuel, but arranging it so it breathes, so the coals last until morning without completely dying. Agnes teaches you this on a Wednesday night, standing at the kitchen hearth, her hands moving through the positioning of logs with the sureness that is purely physical knowledge, the kind that lives in the hands rather than the head, how to read Agnes's moods, which are a language more complex than Latin. The tight set of her shoulders means something is wrong with the dish, and she's thinking through the fix. The particular way she holds a knife when she's inspecting it means she's not actually thinking about the knife. The rare loosening around her eyes, nearly a smile, means something has gone exactly right. How the household works in its rhythms, the tidal patterns of busy and quiet that follow the week and the season. Sunday different from Monday. Market Thursday different from the grey midweek hush when nothing unusual is happening and everyone is just getting through the days. You learn the names properly of the people you see every day. Not just Ned and Mary and Will. The laundry women who come on Mondays, Bess and her daughter Anne. The farm men who eat in the hall at noon when their work brings them near the house. The blacksmith who shoed a horse in the yard last week and stood afterward in the kitchen doorway talking to Agnes, with a familiarity that suggested history. You learn that Lady Bassett keeps a book in her solar, not a Bible, or not only, though the Reformed Bible in English is on the shelf alongside it, a book that contains recipes for medicines, dried herbs, instructions for their use. Agnes provides ingredients sometimes. Lady Bassett is not the only gentrywoman who does this. In the absence of physicians, in a place where the nearest trained doctor is miles away, the households themselves need to provide medicine. You're learning that a household is not a simple thing. It's a village, compressed, complete with its politics, its economies, its secrets, and its stories. December arrives, and with it, something changes. It changes gradually, and then all at once, the way things do. The gradual part, the days getting shorter. Darkness at 4 in the afternoon now, which means the candles and the rushlight go on earlier, which means the cost of light starts to add up in Agnes's accounts. The cold deepening, not dramatically, but definitively, The way a winter that means to stay makes itself comfortable. The household drawing inward, the range of its world contracting to the manor walls and the immediate necessities. The all-at-once part happens on a Tuesday early morning. You're at the kitchen fire, the usual work when you hear horses on the lane. Multiple horses moving fast for the cold and the condition of the road. You hear them before you can see anything. Hoofbeats on the frozen surface, the sound carrying in the still air. Then voices, raised voices from the direction of the yard. Then Mr. Hartley, moving through the house with a speed you've never seen from him, which means something serious. Agnes meets your eyes across the kitchen. She says nothing. She turns back to the board. "Keep working," she says. "You keep working, but your hands slow." The voices in the yard, authoritative, male, carrying the particular timbre of people who expect to be heard. You can't make out words. Then, the upper house, the hall, footsteps on the floor above. Agnes's hands never stop moving. She's making pastry, the fat rubbing into the flour with a sound like distant surf. Methodical, unhurried. Her face is entirely focused on the board. Will, at the hearthside, is very still. It's 20 minutes before Hartley comes to the kitchen door. He looks at Agnes, a look you can't quite decode. "The Priory," he says. "What about it?" Agnes's hand still in the flour. "They found something." Hartley's voice is careful, level. "In the undercroft, during the inspection, documents." He pauses. "And a man." The kitchen is absolutely quiet except for the fire. "They have him," Hartley says. "In York." Agnes's hands start moving again, rubbing fat into flour, steady. "Who was it?" she asks. "Brother Thomas," Hartley says. "From the Priory. He'd been living in the ruins." A pause. "He's been there since the dissolution." 18 months. 18 months in the ruins of the Priory. Agnes says nothing for a moment. The pastry grows under her hands. "Will he be tried?" she asks. "That depends on what they found with him." Hartley's voice is still careful. The careful voice of a man who needs to not say certain things in front of certain people. The documents may matter more than the man. He looks at you briefly, then away. "Agnes," he says, "it would be advisable, if there are any items in this kitchen that could be misinterpreted, that they be moved." Agnes doesn't look up. "There's nothing in this kitchen," she says. "That isn't what it looks like." Hartley nods. He goes. Agnes finishes the pastry, rolls it out, begins lining the pie dish. "Tom," she says, "more water." "You get more water." That evening. You don't know what happened to the documents they found with Brother Thomas in the undercroft of St. Cuthbert's Priory. You don't know what the documents contained. You don't know what happened to Brother Thomas, whether he was tried, what the outcome was. History doesn't always give you those details. The Brother Thomases of 1542 are rarely in the records. The records keep track of the big movements, the dissolution, the warrants, the major trials, but the individual monks scattered to the wind, the ones who stayed and hid and survived or didn't, they move through the gaps. What you know is this. That evening, Agnes goes to the storeroom and comes back with something wrapped in linen. She takes it upstairs. You don't ask. Later, much later, you will understand that the something was the small liturgical items that Agnes had been safekeeping. The things in the oilcloth package from Godfrey, perhaps a chalice, perhaps a breviary, perhaps just a cross, the right kind of cross made of the right kind of permanence. She gives them to someone, you don't know to whom, perhaps to a priest who can be trusted, perhaps to a family whose faith runs deep enough to keep things safe. Perhaps they are still somewhere, These, items from St. Cuthbert's Priory, wrapped in cloth, in the bottom of a box in a house in Yorkshire. Perhaps they were found 300 years later by someone clearing out an attic, wondering where they came from. Perhaps not. What you know for certain is that when Tuesday morning comes, Agnes is at the kitchen fire before you are, as she always is, and the morning starts the same way every morning starts. You light the fire, you fetch the water, you carry the wood, and Agnes teaches you how to make a proper pottage. Not just the daily version, but the real thing, the one that takes time and care, the dried peas soaked overnight, the leeks gone soft in the fat, the seasoning added at the right moment, not a minute before or after. She teaches you because she teaches everyone who works in her kitchen, because the knowledge has to go somewhere, because what you know doesn't disappear when you do. Christmas comes. Christmas in a Tudor household is 12 days. 12 days of Christmastide, which means work. More cooking, more serving, more carrying, but also means something else. Something harder to name. A loosening in the air, a permission to celebrate that the everyday doesn't permit. The 12 days of Christmas, beginning December 25th and running to the Feast of the Epiphany, January 6th. These are the days when the year turns, when the darkness begins, almost imperceptibly, to start giving ground. The great hall at Thornfield is dressed. Holly and ivy wound around the beams. You and Ned spent a morning cutting it from the hedges, your hands scratched and cold, the berries brilliant red against the dark leaves. A Yule log that takes 3 of you to carry in, a massive section of oak that will burn for days, banking and being fed and lasting through the holiday, as a symbol of something older than the church that officially presides over it. The food. Agnes's Christmas is an act of will, not just cooking but creation. The goose, there are 3 of them, rubbed and roasted. The mincemeat pies, the actual mince in them, a medieval inheritance. The dried fruit and spices and meat all together, in a combination that has been made in English kitchens for centuries and will continue to be made in forms you'd vaguely recognise for centuries more. The frumenti, the rich wheat porridge with eggs and dried fruit. The syllabub, the subtlety, this time a boar's head made of spun sugar, because the boar's head is the Christmas centrepiece, the great symbolic dish of the feast. Will is given a mince pie and told he can eat it by the fire. He eats it with the seriousness of a boy doing something sacred. You watch him and feel something that isn't quite homesickness but contains it. Your mother makes mince pies at Christmas, or she made them back in Stainton. You've been here 3 months and the village is 15 miles away and feels further. Your father thatch roofing whatever needed it before the worst of the winter settled. Your 2 sisters, younger than you, the house in Stainton, which is smaller than the Thornfield kitchen and which smells of people and fire, and sometimes the sheep your father keeps in the yard field. You're not there. You're here. Both things are true simultaneously, and there's no contradiction in feeling both of them fully at once. You're exactly where you chose to be, and exactly where you miss being elsewhere from. That's just what it is to be 14 and somewhere new. Agnes gives you a mince pie. "Merry Christmas, Tom," she says. It's the only time she uses your name without the specific instruction that usually precedes it. January. The year turns, January 2nd, and the Christmas ease dissolves overnight into the regular Monday of regular life, which in January means the hardest cold of the year and the longest distance from the harvest that is behind you and the harvest that is months ahead. This is when winter is serious. The stores are into their second half. Not alarming. Agnes counted well. Agnes always counts well, but finite. The bread is more conservative. The pottage a little thinner on most days, save for occasions when full strength is needed. The salt meat from the barrel, which is fine, which is food, but which has been salt for 3 months now and tastes like it. You fetch water in the morning and the well rope is so cold it should be ice but isn't. And your hands in the first minutes after gripping it have a deep ache that runs up into the bones of your forearms. You blow on them. The blood comes back. You carry the bucket. The work of keeping warm is itself work. The fire requires constant attention. The wood that was cut in autumn is going. Ned and the farm men have been cutting more, but cutting wood in January in Yorkshire is its own particular project. The trees sap dry in the cold, but the work of it still massive and physical. You're stronger than you were in October. Your hands have changed. Your arms have changed. You carry more without noticing you're carrying it. Agnes watches this without comment. One evening in late January she shows you something. She pulls a knife from the block beside the preparation bench. An old knife. The blade worn down to half its original width from decades of sharpening. "This was my mother's," she says. "She cooked for a house in Lincoln, not as big as this one." You look at the knife. The handle is wrapped in worn leather, darkened with decades of hands. "She taught me," Agnes says, "the way I teach you." She puts the knife back. Not because she thought I'd be a cook, because she knew the knowledge needed to go somewhere. A pause. That's all teaching is, making sure the knowledge doesn't die with you. She turns back to the board. "Now, you're going to make the bread tomorrow, by yourself. I'll be here, but I won't help unless you're about to do something catastrophic." You look at her. "Tomorrow morning," she says, "get some sleep. The bread, 5 in the morning. The kitchen fire going. You've got that down. You've had it down for weeks. The fire lighting is yours now, the way certain things become yours when you've done them enough that they're no longer instructions but just what happens. The flour, the yeast, saved from yesterday's bread in the small clay pot, the salt, the water warmed at the hearth edge to the right temperature, not hot. The yeast dies in hot water. You've been told this 3 times, and you remember it with the particular permanence of things that have been said 3 times. Your hands in the dough. This is the thing. The texture of bread dough is a different texture from any other thing you've handled. Alive, almost. The yeast already doing its work. The dough pushing back slightly against your kneading. Sticky at first, then, as you work it, developing resistance. You fold and push and fold and push, the heel of your hand pressing down into the dough, the motion becoming rhythmic. Your arms begin to ache. The muscles in your forearms, in the soft part of your palms, the dough changes under your hands. This is the thing Agnes said and that you didn't quite believe until now. You can feel when the bread is ready. Not see it, not measure it. Feel it. A change in the elasticity, a smoothness that wasn't there at the start. 10 minutes more, Agnes says from across the kitchen, where she's doing something with dried herbs and very obviously not watching you. You knead for 10 minutes more. Then the proving, the shaped loaves covered with a cloth, set near the fire to rise, and you stand there and watch the dough not visibly doing anything, because rising is slow, and you can't hurry it. 2 hours later, the bread goes into the oven, and 2 hours after that, Agnes pulls it out. The smell, hot bread, fresh baked from the oven. You made this. from flour and water and yeast and salt and your own hands, this smell, this shape, this thing. Agnes looks at the loaves, taps the bottom of one. The sound it makes tells her something. She nods. Good, she says. Not good, lad, not good work, just good. The bread. March. The light changes. Not dramatically. It never changes dramatically. The turn of the year is not an event but a process. A millimetre of light added each day, imperceptible day to day, and then one morning you realise the sky is lighter at 5 than it was in January, and the days have been growing longer for weeks, and you just hadn't consciously noticed. The yard in March smells different. The mud has come back. The snow is gone. The frost that follows snow is gone, and the ground is soft and saturated and eager. The yard smells of wet earth and the particular fresh quality of early spring, when everything that was frozen is unfreezing and beginning its business. The kitchen garden, the walled area off the east side of the manor where Agnes grows her herbs, is beginning. You can see it from the yard gate, the grey beds of turned soil starting to show the first green of chives, of early parsley, of the winter hardy herbs that have been there all along under the cold and are now making themselves known. Agnes takes you into the garden for the first time. She names things for you. The rosemary, woody and grey, already showing tiny buds. The thyme, low to the ground, last year's stems gone stiff and woody. The sweet Sicily, its feathery leaves the brightest green in the garden. The beds where the summer herbs will go. The basil that can't go out until the last frost is gone, which in Yorkshire you can't be sure of until May. She gives you a bed to manage. Your bed. A patch of ground, perhaps 6 feet by 4. Currently bare earth. Leeks, she says, for autumn. She gives you the seeds wrapped in a twist of cloth. Plant them when the ground's warm enough, you'll know. You take the seeds, your bed, your leeks. Something in you settles quietly, like a stone finding the bottom. Spring comes properly. April and the lane to Aldwick is dry for the first time since October. The ruts hardening in the warmer air, the hedges going green almost visibly fast, the hawthorn blossom beginning at the tips of the branches, white against new leaves. You make the walk to Aldwick on a Thursday in April, and the difference from October is everything. The birds, larks above the fields, a couple of swallows already, arrived back from wherever swallows go in winter, cutting through the air with that impossible speed. The field smells. Not winter mud, but something growing. The green smell of things doing their growing work. Marjorie at the church gate has daffodils in her basket beside the eggs. Spring Tom, she says, using the nickname she's developed for you over the months, which you didn't ask for and have now accepted. Spring Marjorie, you say. She gives you an egg, as she does sometimes, slightly cracked but perfectly edible, and you eat it walking back, still warm from wherever she keeps them. Aldwick in spring is different from Aldwick in autumn, which is different from Aldwick in January, which you now know about all three. A year here. You're nearly a year in. Let's slow down. Because this is the part I want you to feel properly. You are nearly 1 year into your life at Thornfield Manor. You arrived in October with nothing except a letter from a vicar and a bundle of clothes and a wooden cross your mother gave you, and the slightly terrified energy of someone who has just stepped off the edge of the world they know. It's April now. You know things that October you didn't know. How to light a fire so it will last. How to knead bread until it's ready. The feel of it under your hands. How to carry water efficiently, both hands, the weight distributed, without spilling what you can't afford to spill. How to navigate Aldwick on a Thursday, which merchants are honest, which ones adjust their thumb on the scales, which stalls have the best of what you need. You know Agnes's face in all its configurations. You know Will's sleeping sounds and the way he talks about his mother when he forgets to be careful. You know Ned's good mood and his bad mood and how they each smell like horses. You know the church bell schedule in Aldwych so well you'd recognise the pattern asleep. You know how this house moves through its seasons, the stores, the rhythms, the hierarchy, the economy of it. And underneath all of that, the thing that isn't stated but is real, you know something about England in 1542, about what it means to live in a country that is changing its foundational story, and not everyone agrees with the change, about what it means to be Agnes, feeding someone in a spinney in the dark, about what it means to be a monk in a ruined priory or in a cold corner of a graveyard with no proper marker, about what it means to hold certain things quietly, to do certain things in the dark, to know when knowledge is yours and when it's better kept as silence. You are learning, in other words, not just a trade, but a way of being in the world. There's a Sunday in April, one of the good Sundays, the Sundays that feel like a gift, when you don't go to Aldwych for church. Sir Edward has given the household the Sunday to attend a service at a small chapel in the village closer to the manor, which is fine. It's an hour of reformed service and 2 hymns in English, and then you're free. You walk back to Thornfield through the fields, the footpaths through the home field, the ones you know by heart now, covered in spring grass that is young and bright green and slightly wet from the previous night's dew. There's a hill on the far side of the home field. Not a big hill, this is not dramatic countryside, not the high moors that start a few miles north. Just a gentle rise in the land, an old earthwork maybe, or just the way the field lies. From the top of this hill you can see, well, let's be honest, you can't see the whole world. This is Yorkshire, not a Thomas Cromwell's England in miniature. What you can see is yours, the manor below and to the south, the smoke from the kitchen chimney, the lane running north-south, the church tower in Aldwych just visible in the middle distance, the roof lines of the village between here and there, the farms, and further, on a clear day like this one, the beginning of the moors, blue-grey in the distance, the uplands where the sheep go in summer, somewhere beyond that, the sea, though you've never seen the sea, and somewhere in that direction, though too far to see, the ruins of St. Cuthbert's Priory, which are now just stone, just material, waiting to be incorporated into walls and barns and road foundations, and somewhere that you don't know about Brother Thomas in York or wherever he was taken. You sit on the top of the hill for a while. Down below, the smoke from the kitchen chimney rises in the still spring air, straight up, undisturbed. Agnes is making something. She's always making something. The fire is going. The house is warm. You can go back. You will go back. But for now, just for a minute, you sit on the hill and look at the world you've been given. It's not the world you expected when you left Stainton with your bundle and your letter. It's smaller than the things you half imagined and larger than the things you knew. It has more complexity, more darkness, more cold, more people, more questions with no clean answers. It also has Agnes and her bread, Will and his snow angel, Marjorie and her eggs, the kitchen fire at 5 a.m, alive. It has this hill, this particular view, on this particular Sunday, in this particular April. It has your leeks in the kitchen garden, which you check every morning now because they've started coming up. Thin green spears, not yet anything much, but there. You planted them. They're growing. That's yours. Let me tell you something about where you are, because I want you to feel the full weight of it before we go to sleep. You're in England in 1542. You know that. You know the smells and the cold and the hierarchy and the bread. But you're also, and this is the thing, you're in a moment. One specific, particular moment in the history of a place that is still happening. The Reformation that is rewriting England is in progress, unfinished, still being argued and adjusted and bled for. The monks who are gone are recently gone. The people who remember the old faith are alive, many of them. The king who ordered all of this, the real Henry VIII, is alive, aging, enormous, still married to Catherine Howard for about another year before that too goes wrong. The world you're living in has a before that the people in it can remember, and an after that nobody can see yet. You are part of the middle. The turbulent, changing middle. 500 years from now, the things you're living through will be history. People will read about the dissolution of the monasteries in textbooks. They'll visit the ruins. You can visit the ruins of St. Cuthbert's Priory in North Yorkshire today, if you know where to look. The walls still stand into head height in places, the carved stonework you can touch. But right now, it's Tuesday, it's April, the kitchen fire needs lighting and there's water to fetch, and Agnes has a new thing she's going to teach you. She mentioned it at supper, a way of making the stock that she says will improve everything else. The world is not history yet. It's just the world, and you live in it. The evening, April. The day is long enough now that it doesn't feel finished when supper is done. There's still light in the sky at 7, a soft golden light that comes in through the hall windows and falls across the trestle tables and the rushes. Will is sitting near the kitchen door, doing something with a piece of wood and a borrowed knife that may or may not be productive. He's trying to make something, though what is not entirely clear yet. You sit near the hall window with the light on your face. Agnes comes through from the kitchen and stops when she sees you. "Still here?" she says. "Nowhere to be," you say. She makes a sound that is not quite an answer. She sits on the end of the bench near you. This is unusual. Agnes doesn't often sit in the hall. Her world is the kitchen. The kitchen is where she belongs. "My first year," she says, "in Lincoln. The house I was in." She's not looking at you. Looking at the window, the evening light. "I was 12. I was more frightened than I knew how to say." "What made it better?" "Knowing things," she says. "Every time I learned something, how to do something, how something worked, it was one less thing to be frightened of." She's quiet. Knowledge is the only thing they can't take from you once you have it. Everything else, your position, your money, your safety, all of it can go. But what you know is yours. She stands. "Get some sleep," she says. 5 o'clock tomorrow. She goes back to the kitchen. The night. The hall settles into its night sounds. The fire banking down. The dog finding his spot. The heavy, even breathing of people who've been working since before dawn. You lie on your pallet, the same pallet as October, the same straw. But it knows you now, it fits the shape of you in a way new straw doesn't. And you look at the ceiling. The beams above. Old oak, dark with smoke, hung with the dried herbs of last summer's strewing. They've been here 100 years, these beams. They'll be here another 100. Another after that. The smoke that darkened them came from fires that were lit by people whose names aren't in any record. People who fetched water and made bread and learned things the hard way and taught them on. You think about all the people who lay on pallets in this hall before you, the kitchen boys before you who lit this fire and carried this water, the maids who washed these bowls, the stewards who counted these coins. None of them are in the history books. The history books have Henry VIII, have Thomas Cromwell, have the big names of the big movements, but the bread was baked by someone. The fire was lit by someone. The monk in the spinney was fed by someone who got up in the dark and crossed a cold yard with something wrapped in oilcloth and didn't speak about it. Ordinary people, doing ordinary things, and some of those ordinary things were also brave. The sounds of the hall fade. Your eyes grow heavy. This is the part where the day releases you. You can feel it going. The ache in your arms from the kneading, the cold in your feet from the morning's water fetching, the tiredness behind your eyes that has been there since 5 o'clock and has been waiting patiently all day for this moment. Outside the manor walls, England is doing its night things. The owls that hunt the home field, the ones you've heard since October, going about their business. The stream at the bottom of the lane still running, quick from the spring melt, its sound carrying in the quiet night air. Somewhere in Aldwych, the night watchman making his round, calling the hour. Somewhere far away in York, things that you can't affect are being decided. The law, the faith, the country, moving in its large and often brutal ways. And here, in this hall, in this house, in this kitchen garden where the leaks are coming up, here it's just the night, just the fire going low and warm, just the sound of a household breathing. You are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have things you know that you didn't know in October. You have a bed that knows your shape. You have work that matters to someone. You have Agnes, who doesn't say things lightly, saying your bread was good. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. The ceiling of the hall blurs. Tomorrow there will be the fire and the water and the bread. Tomorrow there will be Agnes and Will in the kitchen garden checking. You always check the kitchen garden in the morning now, before the real work starts. Just a few minutes standing in the early light looking at what's growing. Tomorrow there will be the ordinary work of being alive in England in 1542, which is harder and colder and more uncertain than you were taught to expect, and also more real than any story about it. The same as today, the same as yesterday, the same as all the morning stretching ahead, but that's tomorrow. Right now there is only this, the straw beneath you, the firelight at the edges of your closed eyes, the steady breathing of 12 people who are also tired, who are also lying down, who are also letting the day go. The hall grows smaller in the dark, or you grow larger in it. One of the two. Centuries will pass, the hall will change, the trestle tables will go, the rushes will be replaced with stone floors and then with wood. The smoke-darkened beams will be covered over at some point, plastered and whitewashed, and then uncovered again by someone who thinks they are beautiful, which they are. The kitchen will change completely, the hearth becoming a range, the range becoming something electric, the wood gone from the equation. The lane will be paved, Aldwych will grow, the market square still there, but surrounded by buildings the people in this hall couldn't imagine. The church tower of St. Mary's will still be standing. These towers, the stone ones, they last. Someone living in Aldwych today walks past it every day. The moors will still be there. The moors don't change quickly. The wind off the moors will still be direct and determined in October, and cold and clean in April, and always, always carrying something that feels older than whatever you're carrying. People will still be waking before dawn and going to do work that needs to be done. We'll still be learning things from people who know more than them. We'll still be lying down at the end of the day with aching hands and quiet minds and gratitude for warmth. Some things don't change. The need for bread, baked from flour and water and time, that doesn't change. The need for someone to light the fire, that doesn't change. The need for knowledge to go somewhere, for the things you know to be passed on, for teaching to be the act of making sure nothing dies with you, That doesn't change. The need, at the end of the day, for rest, for a place where the cold stops and the work stops and the thinking can slow down and the day can finish. That doesn't change either. Let the sounds of the hall fade. Let the firelight go from amber to orange to red to the deep crimson of coals that have hours left in them. Let the cold of the walls and the warmth of the fire reach their agreement. The particular temperature of a winter night well managed, not warm but warm enough. Let the day go. The market day and the brook crossing and the oilcloth package. The Christmas bread and the snow angel and the song from the spinney. Agnes's knife, and Agnes's silence and Agnes's certain voices. The leeks coming up in your bed in the kitchen garden, thin and green and yours. Let all of it go. You're warm enough. You've done the work. You've learned things today that will matter tomorrow and some things that will matter for longer than that. You're Tom Ashford, 14 years old, in a hall in Yorkshire in England in 1542, and you have survived your first year, and it was harder than you expected and realer than any story about it. And someone, 500 years from now, will be lying in the dark in their own warm bed, in the dark, with the sounds of their own world settling around them. Quieter sounds, different sounds, but the same basic fact of the night doing its work, time moving forward, rest waiting to be taken. The same as you, the same. The last sound you hear is the hall fire settling, one log shifting, a small sound like the house finding its balance. A sound that has been made in this hall in various versions every night for 100 years before you, and will be made in various versions for centuries after. Let it carry you. You've earned this. Sleep. Good night.